And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
The IFR chart, or the flying weather graphic here for Friday morning, shows IFR, solid IFR here over all the Bering Sea, the Aleutians, right on up into Bristol Bay, northward across the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, south side of the Seward Peninsula in toward the Strait. Then VFR into the Chukchi Sea and the western central north slope right on down across the western interior. Marginal VFR here tomorrow morning for the Susitna, Madanuska Valley, Kenai Peninsula area up to the Alaska Range there and in toward the Tanana Valley. Some more IFR, eastern Arctic coast across the Brooks Range into the Koyukuk Valley. And IFR here for the Gulf of Alaska, but in close to the North Gulf Coast there. Otherwise, VFR for the Copper River Basin. Marginal VFR, low clouds along the southeast coast. Some of that back into the inner channels again. But generally VFR, and then that VFR condition holds through tomorrow afternoon for the Panhandle. Good VFR here in the interior. Now all the way up to the Arctic coast, southward in toward Fognak Island, northeast Bristol Bay. VFR. Still a lot of IFR here out over the Bering Sea down to the Aleutians and into the Alaska Peninsula. And then for Saturday morning, lots of IFR in store for the Bering Sea here, St. Lawrence Island, right on down across the Pribilofs, also into the Yukon Delta, a little bit there, and IFR, eastern Aleutians, and mostly IFR even for the western Aleutians there, Adak westward. Some VFR for Bristol Bay, a lot of VFR in the interior here, Arctic coast through the Brooks Range, right on down to the Copper River Basin. Looking at some marginal VFR early Saturday there for Cook Inlet up to the western Susitna Valley. And then again, IFR here staying along or off the coast and south of Prince William Sound. And marginal VFR right along the outer coastline of the Panhandle. And for Saturday afternoon, a zone of IFR here remaining off the coast for the most part with marginal VFR right up along the outer coastline. Good VFR over the inside waters of the Panhandle there. And good VFR here north of the Alaska Range right up to the Arctic Ocean. And marginal VFR here with some scattered, isolated IFR over the southwest interior, especially the mountainous terrain here like the western Alaska Range, maybe Lake Clark, Merrill Passes, and the Auckland Hills there, with marginal VFR for the Seward Peninsula and along the lower Yukon River Valley there out to the Delta. And still a big chunk of IFR there for the Bering Sea and all of the Aleutians. And that slips on up in toward the extreme western Alaska Peninsula. For passes, looking pretty good, looking like a good day, or it will be a good day. It'll be VFR for both Anatuvik and Adigan for Friday. And Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR as well. VFR for Rainy, VFR Windy, Isabel, and Mentasta, all looking really good tomorrow throughout the Alaska Range. Tanita, also VFR. Portage, starting out marginal, sliding in toward VFR conditions throughout the afternoon hours and in toward evening with Chilkoot and White, another VFR day again. And for the freezing levels, cooler air up here, slipping down from the Arctic Ocean in across the North Slope areas, and 6,000 feet right on down across the Kuskokwim Valley there, and then sloping up to 12 to 14,000 feet there over the Northwest Territories of Canada, and 12 to 14,000 feet over the Panhandle as well. And we got some 12,000 foot freezing levels there, nudging northward up to Unalaska Island. And with the icing chart here, that big system, a lot of moisture coming across the Bering Sea, so look for considerable moderate rime icing. Alaska Peninsula right on up into Bristol Bay, northwestward there across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and then back to the west over St. Matthew Island. And then a little bit of icing possibilities here along the eastern border, eastern Arctic coast, and then with a system there just off the western Arctic coast. And for the jet stream, sharp trough axis right through here, so south to north flow to the east of that trough, up to 80 knots, 80 to 90 knots right along the border there. Behind it, westerlies at 85 to 95 knots, taking a dive to the south here at about 80 knots across the Kenai Peninsula on the west side of that sharp trough axis. Out to the west, big low there over the west central Bering Sea. Good southwest flow here, pulling moisture into the interior at about 85 knots. And for 9,000 feet, strong low here out over the Bering Sea. Westerlies 45 knots behind the front and about 65 knots or 50 to 65 knots in advance of the frontal system there, and about 45 here coming into the southwest coast. And then pretty good winds there for the western Arctic coast at 45 knots out of the west, and light for the southeast coast, the Gulf of Alaska, much of south central Alaska as well. 3,000 feet, light winds, panhandle right in across the Gulf of Alaska, northward into the interior. Southwest 40 knots there along the western Arctic coast, with the strongest wind staying just off the coast there. But southwest 55 knots of that front pushing into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and 60 knots southeast winds there up over the northern Bering Sea, turning around to the north at 60 knots for the west central Aleutians. So turbulence-wise, look for a considerable moderate chop here from the Alaska Peninsula all the way out to Kiska Island. And for the western Arctic coast, look for some isolated moderate there, especially for small aircraft from the central coast right on down to about Point Hope or so.